Hey everyone, how are you guys doing? It's me, Lloyd. I'm back with another painting tutorial, and this time I thought I'd show you guys how I made one of these. I use these things as a business card or a name card. As you can see, it's just a little painting with my info at the back. This is a bit sloppy because I've been using this for a while, so I figured I needed to make a new set anyway, so I thought I'd show you guys how I did it. So these are the last two I have. What I usually use them for is like when I go to meetings and whatever, meeting people, I just keep one of these in my wallet, stuck it in there, and when you meet someone, you know, like exchanging business cards, when they give you their card, usually it's printed, I take mine out and just sign it, just put whatever. And I find that people keep these far longer than they would a regular business card, for sure. And I think it's really unique. I haven't seen anyone do this before, but if you want to try it out, I think it's a good way to stand out from the rest of the people in those kinds of meetings. So anyway, first step for us would be to pick the paper. I'm just using a simple, I think this is a 300 GSM Reeves one. I just bought a pad and ripped that out. So this is an A4 size watercolor paper. So what I think I'd do is maybe we could start with just half of that. So instead of using the full A4, we're just going to be using half, which is a 5. That'll make it easier for us to just fill the whole thing in and chop them up into pieces. So it doesn't have to be neat. I actually prefer the ripped cut, the ripped look with the watercolor paper. Gives it a bit more rustic feel to it. So there you go. I think I'd like to use this side. Yeah. I think that'll be perfect. Cool. So we have that. First thing we do with the papers, make sure we secure it down with tape. The reason I go for like just really like taping it down, aside from having it secure, because watercolor paper really warps, especially if you use a lot of water and the paper's really dry. So taping it down keeps the form and keeps it from warping. I also like the effect it has at the edges, you know, keeping it white. And then when you rip it off, if the tape holds, of course, sometimes it bleeds in, you'll have a clean white border. And since most of the watercolor paintings I display go into frames anyway, you can just hide that behind the frame. I just prefer to have a white border around the painting. I'm just taping that down. Yeah, final side. Just make sure it's straight and secure. Cool. Now, next step for me would be to choose the colors, which is most. Oh, that's my bad watercolor set. Hang on, give me a second. Let me grab my better one. I'm back. Sorry about that. I mixed up my watercolor set. There you go, pretty one. The other one was an older set I cannibalized for parts. Like, I just take bits of colors from it and then swap or whatever. But this is the one I've been using. And our mixing plate, some brushes, and water. Cool. So first step would be for me, I like choosing two colors, like 2 to 3 colors. I usually go for my favorites, which is blue, some pink, and maybe some purples. But I've been using that color scheme for a while, so maybe I can try something else for this one. Might. Still want to do my old color scheme though. Maybe I'll just start with a basic pink color. So I take my brush, my flat watercolor brush. I get it all wet. I just get a punch of pigment into my brush. Go to my mixing plate. I already have a pink mixed up in here, so it's dried up. All I have to do is like just mix it in, get the pigments wet, nice and wet. Cool, looks good. I like that pink, so we'll be starting with that pink. At this point, you'll notice the paint I'm using is really watery, because I like to keep the first layer really light, so less pigment, more water. And first step really is just to cover everything. The thing with watercolor is there's a thing called paper white, or at least that's what my teacher back then taught me. It's when you leave a part of the watercolor white, that's actually that's what a light source would be. So that would be the lightest bit of your watercolor. It's good to leave parts of that out for like moons or light sources like bulbs or fire, whatever. But for this one, since we're just doing an abstract painting, we're just trying to fill in the spaces, the paper, I want to have everything covered, so no white spots as much as I can. That doesn't mean I'm gonna go ham wild on the color. It just means I want the whole paper covered. Ah, cool. Maybe I could mix in another kind of color. What will look good with pink? I haven't tried green and pink before. That would be interesting. So I'm gonna choose this cream. Get my brush nice and wet and clean. Get my palette up and running. Up and running. Start with the corner. Oh, that I forgot to mix some water. It's okay. Bit more pigment than I wanted, but I can work with that. Just get more water in there, spread it around, and that should mix in. You notice what I like to do now is I want to mix in the two colors, but if I just go right for it, what will happen is they'll bleed in together and everything will just turn murky and gray. So what I do, what I like doing is I like painting just before they both hit each other, and mix in a bit, have a clean brush, and instead of mixing the pigments in, I just put a bunch of water in between them, and then that should let me just have them flow together. So if you notice, it'll just naturally flow. That'll give you quite a good effect. Just the funnest bits of watercolor is like the unpredictability of the water and the paper and like the whole thing. So that's how I I learned to control it, by just putting pigment at the edges of one color, doing the same with the other color you're trying to blend together. And then clean your brush out, make sure it's pretty wet, and then just let them blend on their own. So more pigment, paint, green. I don't think I've tried green with pink before as a color combination. This should be fun. Which is weird, because I've always painted my plants as pink. I just find it weird trying to make green plants. Cause I mean, I know plants are green, but I'm trying to go for the surreal look anyway, so... Oh, what is that? Where'd that blue come from? Oh. So, at this point, everything's just wet. It's a good chance, it's a good opportunity to just play around with the water. So I might shift over to a smaller brush and just try to guide some of the color mixes as much as I can without making it gray. See, it's already getting murky around here. That's what you're trying to avoid. You don't want that murk because it'll ruin the mix. Instead of making it look like they're blending together, it'll just look like gray or unfinished. That will probably, like here, it bled out. I don't like the look of that, so what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna add more green just to overpower the gray. And I go for my pinks and just keep doing that. Just adding pigments to the wet water, to the wet paper, and see how my random bits of pigment blend in. Cool. I'm still not going for form. At this point, I'm just trying to fill in as much of the paper as possible with like random details, just to break up the paper. So, like here, it looks like the paper absorbed bits of the pigment here in an interesting pattern. So I might just use that to get more paints in. Spread that around with the water. Go back to my greens. Much more green here. Then pull some of that out, just to let it spread. Of course, eventually we'll come to a point where the paper's gonna be too wet to continue. See, it's warping like crazy now. It's like a pillar. I don't know if you guys can see it, but it's warped so much that there's an air pocket at the bottom. Which I'll just let it do that because that will add an interesting layer of texture to my painting. Because since it has random bumps in it, it'll just pull the water and the pigment in ways that I wouldn't even try. So another thing I like doing is I like to make sure that the edges of the painting are covered with dark pigments. The reason for that is I like the effect it has on the edge of the paper. Also, I learned that to make a painting look finished is an easy way. Now, of course, you have to finish the painting, but an easier way to make it look finished if you're painting and you feel like it needs a little bit more work is just to paint in the edges. Like, make sure the edges are dark. That'll make the painting look a bit more stable and finished. Like, you put in more time with it. So I like doing the edges like really dark. Not so dark, but we have these little sharp edges. I don't like that. We don't like that for this painting. Sorry, that was a bit harsher than I intended. So what I'm trying to do now is with a clean brush, I'm just trying to round out all the hard edges I can see. And at this point, I reckon I might stop the stream for a bit because the paper's overworked. I might let it dry for a few minutes and see how it turns out. Because right now it's really bulging. So that means the paper I'm using is really dry, and I've been using too much. I've been putting too much water into it, and it's just absorbing all that water and warping. That's also part of the reason we take the Dan. Can you imagine how much this will warp if we didn't? Cool. Anyway, I think that's as much the paper can take for now. I'll be back in like an hour or two, see how this dries out, and then we'll finish up. Thanks for joining, you guys. See you in a bit. Bye.